to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on tonight's headlines. Peacemakers versus insurgency. President Marcos Jr. called on the military to be peacemakers in the country's fight against communist insurgents, citing how his administration has moved away from the old anti-insurgency approach.
President Joko and
Indonesian President Joko Widodo met Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong during a trip to the city-state for an annual leaders retreat. They witnessed the exchange of several MOUs in energy, sustainability, health, human capital development, and security. And anger as Indonesia's court acquits two police over stadium crush. An Indonesian court acquitted these two senior police officers charged with negligence over a stadium crowd crush last year that killed 135, angering the relatives of those who died in one of football's worst tragedies. And the battle to save Cambodia's river dolphins from extinction. Cambodia has announced tough new restrictions on fishing in the vast river to try and reduce the number of dolphins killed in nets. First in our news, President Marcos Jr. called on the military to be peacemakers in the country's fight against communist insurgents, citing how his administration has moved away from the old anti-insurgency approach. Speaking before the Armed Forces of the Philippines' 9th Infantry Spear Division in Camarines Sur, the president recognized the role of the military as war fighters who put pressure on the enemies of the state. Take a look.
Ang mission ng ating mga sundalo ngayon ay medyo nahalo na, nagbabago na ng konti. Whereas before, we asked you all of the individuals, men and women in the military, to be war fighters. Fulfill your primary mission of defending the people of the communities here in Bicol. Also now, we are asking you to be peacemakers because we have changed our approach to the communist terrorist groups that we have been encountering. We are now not only presenting them with a military force, we are presenting them with other options. We are presenting them with a life after their life as rebels. And that, I think, has become the reason why we have slowly succeeded in the so-called whole of society, whole of nation approach in terms of our dealings with these groups that originally would like to bring down the government by armed struggle. And now I think even although they technically have not abandoned the concept of armed struggle, I think the efforts of those dissidents have been redirected in another way.
Meanwhile, President Marcos also said the government is now tackling structural issues in the agricultural sector, which includes the country's prevalent small-scale farming to ensure national food security. In a chance interview with reporters following the distribution of government aid at the CWC Cafuerte Sports Center in Pili, Camarines Sur, the president discussed government efforts to boost food production. Take a look.
We have to convert the Department of Agriculture into a high-tech operation dahil that's the only way ngayon to increase production. So we have to bring that technology. The technology exists. Nandiyan naman eh. magpaturo tayo sa iba-iba. Dati tayo nagtuturo sa kanila, ngayon tayo mag-aaral sa kanila. Pero matutunan natin yung pinakamagagandang bagong teknik at strategiya para sa pagsasaka at ipapasa natin yan sa mga farmer. Ang pinakauna na aming talagang tinutugunan ay yung tinatawag na consolidation. Para tumaas ang production natin, para bumaba ang presyo ng produksyon, kailangan malalaki, malalawak ang mga pinag-aanihan, ang sinasaka. Dito sa Pilipinas, maliliit lang. So, we depend on cooperatives. So ngayon, ang ginagawa natin ay in coordination with the CDA para patibayin natin mga cooperative para mabilis ibaba ang polisiya para sa mga magsasaka. Kung ano yung magandang hybrid, kung ano yung magandang inbred, kung ano yung bagay doon sa lugar na yun, kung ano yung mga bagong technique para yung mga bagong fertilizer na pwedeng gamitin.
Now, during his meeting with officials of the International Rice Research Institute, or ARI, in Los Baños, Laguna last November, the president said he found renewed hope in technological innovations that could greatly shape the country's agricultural industry over time. Indonesian President Joko Widodo met Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong during a trip to the city-state for an annual leaders' retreat. The two leaders met at Singapore's presidential palace, where Prime Minister Lee hailed the excellent bilateral relations between the two countries. They also witnessed the exchange of several MOUs in energy sustainability, health, human capital development, and security. Take a look.
President Jokowi and I also discussed new areas of cooperation. First, on the digital economy. We signed a memorandum of understanding on the TechX program today. This will allow young tech professionals from Singapore and Indonesia to undergo work exchanges and gain experience from each other's tech industries. Our tech cooperation will strengthen ASEAN collaboration in this emerging sector, and this includes working towards a digital economy framework agreement under Indonesia's ASEAN chairmanship. Secondly, on sustainability, there's much potential in the green economy sector. We signed an MOU on renewable energy cooperation today. This will support commercial arrangements on the development of renewable energy capabilities, on transmission infrastructure, and cross-border electricity trading. It will strengthen the energy infrastructure and energy transition and energy security for both Singapore and Indonesia, and also support regional initiatives like the ASEAN Power Grid. It's a win-win outcome. We signed the MOU on sustainable urban and housing development, which will facilitate cooperation in developing innovative financing for smart and sustainable infrastructure development, and significantly will include the Nusantara capital city as a pilot, and his vision for a green and smart Nusantara. It's a major priority for the President and for Indonesia. One of the MOUs today covers collaboration on knowledge sharing, capacity building and research to support the planning and development of Nusantara as a smart and sustainable city. And there have also been expressions of interest from our private sector in the project, and we will encourage Singaporean entrepreneurs and companies to participate in this.
First, the high interest of Singaporean investors in the development of the Nusantara National Capital City. Second, the agreement to intensify cooperation in the field of renewable energy, which will, among others, be used to fulfill the energy demands of both countries. Third, enhancing cooperation in the digital field, including information and data centers, and the cooperation to develop human resources. And we have the Apple Academy and IBM Academy in Batam. Fourth, in the field of trade, we welcome the entry of Indonesian farm products to supply Singapore's chicken demand. Fifth, the strengthening of cooperation in the field of basic health services and health technology. technology and also the investments towards hospital development in Indonesia. Overall, in today's meeting, we have 20 letter of intent from the Singaporean private sector to invest in the Nusantara National Capital City. I conveyed my deepest appreciation for Singapore's support towards Indonesia's chairmanship of ASEAN, and Indonesia's priority is to ensure ASEAN remains important and relevant for its people and the world, to ensure the solidity and centrality of ASEAN to remain as the engine for peace and stability in the region, and to ensure Southeast Asia continue to be an epicenter of growth. I also invite Singapore's participation at the ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum, which will be convened in September 2023, back-to-back with the 43rd ASEAN Summit.
Staying in Singapore, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong said the city-state would work with Indonesia and other Southeast Asian countries, as well as partners like the United Nations, to push Myanmar's military rulers to implement the stalled 5-point consensus peace plan. Take a look.
On Myanmar, we both regretted the lack of progress in ASEAN's 5-point consensus. Singapore will continue working with Indonesia and with ASEAN members, plus ASEAN's partners like the UN, to push for the full implementation of the 5 points of consensus.
Then on Myanmar, as ASEAN chair, Indonesia will push for progress in the implementation of the 5-point consensus and to conduct engagement with all parties to open up the path towards an inclusive national dialogue. And we also reiterate the importance of reducing tensions and ending violence and ensuring that humanitarian assistance can reach all parties that need it. That is all that I wish to convey. Hope to see you soon in Indonesia for the ASEAN Summit. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of the joint press conference.
In tonight's other news, the U.S. offering compelling video proving that Russian fighter jets were the aggressors in a confrontation with an American Air Force drone over the Black Sea this week. Now, newly declassified Pentagon video from the drone's camera captured a Russian warplane spraying jet fuel directly in the path of this drone, one of several close passes by Russian fighters, according to the Pentagon. The declassified 42-second video shows an Su-27 jet bearing down on the propeller-driven MQ-9 drone, releasing streams of fuel as it passes. An Su-27 makes another pass, again dumping fuel as it does so. The video is then interrupted. A cut, the U.S. military said, lasts for 60 seconds as a result of a Russian jet striking the drone. When the feed returns, part of the drone's propeller is now missing. The American pilot may have accidentally bumped the drone. They say there's no question where the orders to harass the U.S. plane came from. The U.S. assesses that the actions of the Russian pilots were approved by top Kremlin leaders, according to 3 U.S. officials familiar with this intelligence, though the actual collision appears to be pilot error.
So first of all, I would like to highlight U.S. European Command's statement released earlier today confirming that 2 Russian Su-27 aircraft conducted unsafe and unprofessional intercept with a U.S. Air Force intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance unmanned MQ-9 aircraft that was operating within international airspace over the Black Sea today. What we saw, again, were fighter aircraft dumping fuel in front of this UAV and then getting so close to the aircraft that it actually damaged the propeller on the MQ-9. We assess that it likely caused some damage to the Russian aircraft as well. To our knowledge, well, we know that the Russian aircraft did land. I think the key point here is that while intercepts in and of themselves are not that uncommon, the fact that this type of behavior from these Russian pilots, that is uncommon and unfortunate and unsafe. And because of the damage, we were in a position to have to essentially crash it into the Black Sea. To my knowledge, at this point in time, the Russians have not recovered that aircraft.
Now, Russia insists the drone was in temporary airspace. The Russian Defense Ministry said its fighter jets were trying to identify the intruder flying near Crimea when the drone's own abrupt maneuvering caused it to crash. The ministry accused the U.S. of provoking the incident, saying the drone flew with its transponders off and violating the borders established by the Kremlin because of the war. General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said the drone sank into the waters more than 4,000 feet deep, probably was destroyed, and that mitigating measures were taken to ensure no intelligence could be accessed.
Repeat, we know where it landed in the Black Sea. It's probably about maybe 4,000 or 5,000 feet of water, something like that. So any recovery operation is very difficult at that depth by anyone. That's the first point. Secondly is, true, we don't have any ships there, but we do have a lot of allies and friends in the area. We'll work through recovery operations. That's U.S. property, and we'll leave it at that at this point. There is a pattern of behavior recently where there is a little bit more aggressive actions being conducted by the Russians. We think we haven't completed our analysis as to why that's happening, and it wasn't just involving us. There was some incidents earlier with the British and some other nations as well.
In tonight's other news, an Indonesian court acquitted 2 senior police officers charged with negligence over a stadium crowd crush last year that killed 135 people. It angered relatives of those who died in one of football's worst tragedies. Another officer was jailed for 18 months, but families of the victims said he had been treated too leniently. Malang Police Officer Bambang Sidik Achmari, who was accused of ordering his subordinates to fire tear gas, was found not guilty by the court in Surabaya, capital of East Java. Let's listen in.
Menyatakan terdakwa Bambang Sidik Ahmadi SH tersebut tidak terbukti secara sah dan meyakinkan bersalah melakukan tindak pidana sebagaimana dalam dakwaan 1 dan dakwaan 2 dan dakwaan 3 jaksa penuntut umum. 2. Membebaskan terdakwa oleh karena itu dari dakwaan ke-1 dan dakwaan ke-2 dan dakwaan ke-3 jaksa penuntut.
Saya merasa rasa keadilan kami kembali terkoyak setelah kemarin putusan kemarin yang kita dengar itu juga ringan, kemudian hari ini lagi-lagi dijatuhi putusan ringan kayak gitu, dan saya rasa rasa keadilan yang terkoyak itu bukan hanya dari saya, ibu saya, keluarga saya, tapi juga keluarga korban yang lain, kemudian juga ribuan pasang saksi.
Now, the crush in October at a venue in the East Java city of Malang killed 135 people after police fired tear gas into packed stands when supporters invaded the pitch. Hundreds of people fled for narrow exits, resulting in a stampede that left many trampled and suffocated to death, including more than 40 children. Police described the October 1 pitch invasion as a riot and said 2 officers were among the dead. But survivors accused the police of using excessive force. Officers were seen kicking and beating supporters on the pitch before indiscriminately firing tear gas into the stands. Football's world governing body FIFA outlaws the use of such riot control methods inside stadiums. 3 local police officers have also been charged over the incident and are awaiting verdicts. Indonesian President Joko Widodo ordered an investigation and pledged to demolish and rebuild the Kanjuruhan Stadium according to FIFA standards. A task force investigating the crush has called on the head of Indonesia's Football Association and all the members of its executive committee to resign, but they have refused to do so. The match was a clash between fierce East Javan rivals Arema FC and Persibaya Surabaya, with Arema losing 3-2. FIFA head Gianni Infantino in October called the crush one of the darkest days for football. In other news beyond the region, 2 police officers in the western Canadian city of Edmonton have been shot and killed. As Eagle News correspondent Thomas I. Likeness reports, the officers had responded to a call about domestic dispute. Take a look.
The officers arrived at this apartment complex in west central Edmonton about 1:00 a.m. local time yesterday morning. They went inside the building and approached the suite where a family dispute had been taking place. There, they were met by a man who gunned them down. Police Chief Dale McPhee says the officers didn't have time to defend themselves. McPhee says other officers took the pair to hospital, but despite first aid efforts, the 2 officers were pronounced dead on arrival. He adds the gunman is also dead. He died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. A woman complainant in the apartment was taken to hospital with life-threatening injuries. She remains there in serious but stable condition. The officers have been identified as 35-year-old Constable Travis Jordan, an 8.5-year veteran of the service, and 30-year-old Constable Brett Ryan, who's been with the service for about 5.5 years. Officer shooting deaths are rare in Edmonton. Only 8 police officers have ever been killed in the line of duty, and never have 2 been killed on the same day. The last time an Edmonton police officer was killed was 8 years ago, and before that, it was 25 years ago. Reporting from Edmonton, Canada, Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Unions representing more than 1 million health workers in England, including nurses and paramedics, but not doctors, reached a deal to resolve months of disruptive strikes for higher wages. The announcement came as early career physicians spent a 3rd day on picket lines, and the day after UK Treasury Chief Jeremy Hunt announced a budget that included no additional money for labor groups that have staged crippling strikes amid a punishing cost of living crisis and double-digit inflation. Our bureau chief from the United Kingdom, Love and Season, reports from London.
Teachers, London Underground train drivers and civil servants joined striking doctors in a mass stoppage just as Britain's Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt unveiled his tax and spending plans.
In the face of a cost of living crisis, we have demonstrated our values by protecting struggling families with a £2,500 energy price guarantee, one-off support and the uprating of benefits with inflation. Taken together, these measures are worth £94 billion over this year and next, one of the largest support packages in Europe. That averages, Madam Deputy Speaker, over £3,300 of cost of living help for every household in the country.
With hundreds of thousands of workers walking out, it was touted as the biggest single day of industrial action since a wave of unrest began last year. These teachers have been striking since Monday, like tens of thousands of their colleagues across England.
I feel very strongly about it that our work is not rewarded the way it should be. We've worked really hard through the pandemic. We've never worked as hard, and it has never been so stressful as it has been in the pandemic. And and we feel that all of this has been forgotten. And
the latest stoppage by teachers, a 2-day strike starting Wednesday, was set to affect every publicly funded school in England.
Good. We want them to be annoyed. We want them to be annoyed as annoyed as we are, because we want them to cause a fuss. More of a fuss means that hopefully action gets taken.
From nurses to lawyers, workers hit by a cost of living crisis have been striking across the economy. But the government insists big pay hikes are unaffordable and will only fuel inflation. Workers say they have not kept up with inflation. Other issues include conditions, job security, and pensions. Other groups walking out Wednesday included UK university staff and BBC journalists in England. The strike by train staff in the ASLEF and Rail, Maritime and Transport RMT unions in London left the entire underground train network at a standstill. People on the London market say they are struggling with rocketing UK inflation and fear the help from the government, as Chancellor Jeremy Hunt announces extra support will not be enough.
The mere fact that people haven't got as much money as they used to have, and things like fruit now, used to be a necessity, it's not anymore. It's sort of get to be a luxury. People are cutting back, they're not buying as much. Everything's a fortune, it's, you know, it's scary. Very expensive. It's still too expensive. You know, some of these poor old people or someone with a big family, what chance they got? You know, something's got to give. Something has got to give. It can't go on.
Basically, I've seen in the gas, when I'm paying for my gas, and every now and again you go into shops, and like at one time the price is like 85 pence, 90 odd pence. The next minute is £1.20, £1.30, £1.40. Like every other week is jumping up a couple pences.
Meanwhile, UK hospital doctors in England launched a 3-day stoppage claiming some were paid less than coffee shop workers. The British Medical Association, which represents junior doctors, says they have suffered equivalent of a 26% cut to their pay since 2008-2009.
It's really about, you know, over several years, our pay per person has gone down in real terms, kind of when adjusted for inflation. And you know, the work's very difficult as it always has been, but I think it's mainly you can only restore pay by increasing it, and I think that's part of it. But the reason that I think it's so important is that, you know, we've got a national health service and we want to maintain that as a public service, and in order to do that you need to pay your employees. You know, we're seeing record waiting times for like all sorts of elective procedures. We're seeing the demand is enormous. Like I mean, I've been doing it 5 years postgraduate, and every year it's kind of building up. And I think the main thing is kind of from a personal point of view and from a staff point of view is kind of the mental health impact it has, kind of working so much more than you had to, you know, on nights and, you know, things like that.
I can't afford to get the tube every day. I can't afford lunch. Like, I can't afford to like have a Diet Coke. Like, it's just like at the canteen. It's just really like, it's just hard. Like, and I think we did a 5-year degree for this. We're in so much student debt, which is such a big interest. And like, you have to work, as in like have a job through med school as well whilst you're revising, because like it's just not enough money. So you start already a bit burnt out and completely in all of this debt, which is only growing, and then you start on £14 an hour, and like it's just not enough. I do love being a doctor, but like some of the stuff you do in an hour and the things you see and the what you give from yourself to someone else to like try and help them, and then you think like, God, that somebody thinks that's worth £14, and then you have to like cycle home because the train's too expensive and stuff. Like, it's just tough. Like the life of a doctor's getting harder and harder.
Unions show little signs of ending the strike that began last year, and the government continues to resist their demands. It says it wants to work with unions to achieve, quote, fair and reasonable pay rises, but only if strike action ends. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, this is Love and Season, reminding you to stay alert, for we live in extraordinary times.
Thanks, Love. Every year, the most sweeping international contemporary art show graces Los Angeles. The LA Art Show, hosted by the LA Convention Center. The LA Art Show is a global and showcase of international and domestic galleries, artists, and contemporary artworks. At the scene are Eva and Alan Basalyahe.
From modern to contemporary, digital to interactive, the LA Art Show returns for its 28th run.
This event once again transforms the Los Angeles Convention Center into a mega art gallery.
So today you're actually looking at two different styles that I actually work with. One being my Out of the Darkness, which is the fingerprints and the hands that you see where it's engraven. That's come from Nelson Mandela, South Africa, as inspiration. And then the other side is where the character is meant to be you as an individual, and so you're able to express your feelings onto the actual paintings. And with most of my work, I also work in gold and diamonds, so what you're seeing here is 23 karat gold leaf, in multiple layers.
I was always interested in sort of a color-filled, flat painting. I found this material, plexiglass. It could show the depth, not like a conventional canvas painting. And then the colors that I work, it really matches and work with the material itself. I mix colors with this special ink that I mix with, and then each color is created in one at a time.
This is a rain, but the rain of letters. So the idea is to change the way the letters are perceived and to give color, individuality, to make them free. And so they can represent a lot of our thought, a lot of our storytelling. So you are invited to come inside and enjoy what is around you. In art, in contemporary art, what we care is give me something new and a new way to see around me. They say the sunrise and sunset are the same thing. The only thing that changes is our point of view. So I would like you to change your point of view.
Saying that one could get lost in art isn't some flight of fancy.
Especially when that art is immersive, both figuratively and literally.
Eva and Alan, Los Angeles, California, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Thanks, Eva and Alan. Bulging gray heads break the turbid waters of the Mekong River in Cambodia as a pod of rare Irrawaddy dolphins surfaces to breathe, drawing excited murmurs from tourists watching from nearby boats. Now, this thrilling sight may soon be no more than a memory as numbers of the endangered mammals dwindle despite efforts to preserve them. But Cambodia has announced tough new restrictions on fishing in the vast river to try and reduce the number of dolphins killed in nets. Take a look.
By the point of survive, bà pe khơi cọt tràn cọt vài lên chẳng khơi thiêu sẽ khơi thiêu cọt màu mỡ cọt vài cọt chặt đáy nhóm nguyên cao rùng ướp mình thèm tiền bà pan tay không ngà nên nhóm nơi tầm nhà rộng mùi khai bạt bỏng bờ sân chia rụp hiệp nâng việc ban nâng dung vậy thiết dân survive chặt tay khai tại dân cà phê bạn chẳng á cho nhóm miền bờ
chóp mình rung cần tôi với cần tôi bỏ nó cứ chóp cần tôi chúng ta chóp cần tôi chúng ta đã chóp bằng sạp hàng này nó miếng tay lại
bờ ban ở lớp miền sai 4 bờ ban thầm chất sập nè nông chỉ lọp về hốc sập tới chất sập nè nó dương đặt po bàn thái nhưng đập này có bàn thái vì tệ tung nó dương trong ban du hơi cầm lăng đập bàn thái đập bay bầm pinh còn lại nó chỉ lọp háo nữa bàn thái đôi xa qua thẳng cả mà có bàn thái chân chia đọc can này dùng và bật bật là mớ bên nơi tại chia đọc can tam bị khâu dương mà tam coi dương châu thưa cá dương tranh thưa cá về sòng ngòm chừng đọc với dân châu hộp bài vô ấy thì tranh thưa sẽ cảm hiểm hát bên đôi dịch sầm áo tam pran này tam mà vì đăng dân group đồng hiền
As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.